Right now, some of the smartest people you know are agreeing to a decision that will be seen as catastrophically stupid in 5 years. They've all read the right books. They all believe they're being rational. And you've probably done the same thing this week. It happens not in moments of confusion, but in moments of absolute comforting clarity. There is a psychological flaw, a crack in the human mind, that intelligence doesn't protect you from. In fact, your intelligence makes you more vulnerable to it, because it makes you a better lawyer for bad ideas. Right now, as you're sitting there, you are being influenced by this force. It's shaping your political beliefs, the products you buy, the way you think about your neighbors. It operates in your family text threads, your workplace meetings, and most powerfully of all, in the perfectly tuned social media feed in the palm of your hand. Think about the last time you were in a group discussion and you had a doubt, a small nagging feeling that the consensus was wrong, but you stayed silent. You told yourself it wasn't worth the hassle. That silence, that is the sound of this mechanism taking hold. In 1961, a woman who had barely escaped the Nazi regime with her life sat in a bulletproof glass booth in a Jerusalem courtroom. She was there to watch the trial of Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust. The world expected to see a monster, a diabolical genius of evil. But what she saw was something far more terrifying: a bureaucrat, a joiner, a man who spoke in clichés. And in her final report, she wrote 4 words that explain almost everything about how good, intelligent people can collectively participate in monstrous acts. 4 words that are the key to this entire video. This isn't just about avoiding bad decisions at work. This is about how functioning democracies vote for their own destruction, how billion-dollar companies like Boeing and Enron make choices that kill people and collapse markets, how entire societies can march willingly into catastrophe, convinced of their own righteousness every step of the way, and the technology that has been built in the last decade has weaponized this vulnerability, creating consensus machines that dismantle our ability to think for ourselves, one like at a time. When enough people succumb to this pattern, civilizations don't collapse with a bang. They collapse with applause for a terrible idea. By the end of this video, you will see this pattern, this phenomenon called groupthink everywhere, in history, in the news, and most uncomfortably in yourself. You'll understand the 8 specific symptoms that signal its presence. You'll know the precise neurological mechanism that makes your brain crave consensus over truth. And you will have a concrete set of practices, a toolkit for intellectual self-defense that you can start using today to resist it. But first, pause for a moment. I need you to answer this with total honesty. Think of a group you belong to, your workplace, your political tribe, your circle of friends. What is the one opinion you would be terrified to voice in that group? The one belief that would get you cast out? If you can think of one, instantly you already know deep down that you are living inside the very bubble I'm about to describe. The term for this phenomenon is groupthink. It was coined in the 1970s by a Yale psychologist named Irving Janis, and his definition is beautifully simple. Groupthink is a mode of thinking that people engage in when they are deeply involved in a cohesive in-group, when the members' strivings for unanimity override their motivation to realistically appraise alternative courses of action. Put more simply, groupthink is what happens when the desire to belong overpowers the desire to be right. It's a process where a group of smart individuals becomes collectively dumber than any single one of its members. This is the central paradox. It's not about stupidity. It's not about lack of information. Jen has studied some of the most intelligent, well-informed decision-making bodies in American history, the Kennedy administration, for example. He found that the smarter the group, the more susceptible they could be. Why? Because smart people are better at rationalization. When the group settles on a bad idea, the high IQ members are the most skilled at constructing elaborate, sophisticated arguments for why it's actually a brilliant one. They don't just go along with the group, they become its most effective lawyers. This seems completely counterintuitive. We assume that putting more smart people in a room leads to better decisions. We believe in the wisdom of crowds. But Janice showed that under certain conditions, the opposite happens. The group's collective IQ seems to plummet. The social dynamics of the group itself, the friendships, the hierarchies, the shared identity begin to actively suppress critical thinking, dissent, and the perception of reality. The top priority shifts from "let's find the right answer" to "let's maintain group harmony." And here's the insidious part. It feels good. Being in a state of groupthink is comforting. It's a feeling of solidarity, of shared purpose, of absolute clarity. Doubt vanishes. Ambiguity disappears. You feel like you're part of a brilliant, unstoppable team that has finally figured it all out. It's a cognitive and emotional high. The friction of disagreement is replaced by the smooth, effortless glide of consensus. It's this seductive feeling of rightness that makes groupthink so incredibly dangerous. It's a poison that tastes like honey. It's the comfortable, warm, well-lit path to disaster. This vulnerability is not a modern invention. It's wired into our evolutionary hardware. For hundreds of thousands of years, being cast out from your tribe was a death sentence. Our brains evolved a powerful mechanism to prevent this. Neuroscientists have shown that the experience of social exclusion or rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain, the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula. Disagreeing with a consensus your group holds dear doesn't just feel psychologically uncomfortable. On a neurological level, it feels like getting punched. Conversely, when you conform to the group's opinion, your brain's reward centers, like the nucleus accumbens, light up, giving you a little hit of dopamine. Your brain literally pays you to agree. The modern world has created a catastrophic mismatch. This ancient survival mechanism, designed for small hunter-gatherer bands, is now operating in a globalized, hyper-connected world of billion-person social networks and complex, high-stakes decisions. The result is that our hardwired desire to fit in is constantly short-circuiting our ability to think clearly about everything from public health to foreign policy. But before we understand how to resist this, we need to meet the woman who stared into the abyss of 20th century groupthink and understand what it cost her to report back what she saw. Her name was Hannah Arendt. She was a German Jewish philosopher, a brilliant student of the great thinkers Martin Heidegger and Karl Jaspers in the 1920s. She was, by all accounts, destined for a quiet, distinguished academic life. But history had other plans. As the Nazis rose to power, she watched the intellectual and cultural elite of Germany, her professors, her colleagues, the most educated and sophisticated people in Europe, succumb to a creeping collective madness. She saw them rationalize, make excuses, and ultimately actively collaborate with a monstrous regime. She later wrote that the problem wasn't that they were unintelligent, but that their intelligence had become untethered from the act of judgment. In 1933, Arendt was arrested and interrogated by the Gestapo. She managed to talk her way out and immediately fled Germany, eventually making her way to America. She spent the rest of her life wrestling with one question. How did this happen? How does an entire nation of seemingly civilized, educated people become complicit in industrial-scale murder? Her chance to confront this question directly came in 1961. The Israeli intelligence agency, the Mossad, had captured Adolf Eichmann in Argentina. Eichmann was the logistical mastermind of the Holocaust, the man who organized the trains, the schedules, the mechanics of the final solution. He was brought to Jerusalem to stand trial, and Hannah Arendt went to cover it for the New Yorker magazine. Picture the scene. The courtroom is packed. The world is watching. Everyone, including Arendt, expects to see a real-life monster, a figure of profound Shakespearean evil. Eichmann is enclosed in a bulletproof glass booth to protect him from assassination. And for months, Arendt sits there watching this man, listening to him testify. And what she discovered shocked her to her core. Eichmann wasn't a raving ideologue or a sadistic psychopath. He was a bureaucrat. He was mediocre. He was a joiner, a man whose primary motivation throughout his life seemed to be a desperate desire to belong to something, to climb the ladder, to be a good team player. He wasn't stupid, but he was, in her words, thoughtless. He spoke in cliches, in stock phrases, in the empty jargon of the Nazi bureaucracy. He would say things like, "Official language is my only language." He wasn't thinking for himself. He was letting the language of the group think for him. When the judges asked him if he felt guilty, he said, yes, but only in the sense of obeying orders. He insisted he had never personally harmed a Jew. He was just doing his job efficiently and professionally. He saw himself as a good soldier. He was, in his own mind, a moral man. This led Erin to her most famous and most controversial conclusion. She wrote that the great evil she was witnessing in that courtroom was not radical or diabolical, it was banal. And this gave us those 4 haunting words, the banality of evil. The evil was committed by terrifyingly normal people who had surrendered their capacity for independent thought. Their crime was not hatred, not sadism, but a failure to think. A failure to ask, is what my group is doing right? They had outsourced their conscience to the group. When Arendt published her book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil, the backlash was immediate and vicious. She was accused of defending Eichmann, of being a self-hating Jew, of blaming the victims. She was ostracized by friends, colleagues, and the very community she belonged to. They wanted Eichmann to be a monster because that would make him an aberration. Arendt's terrifying insight was that he wasn't. He was a product of a system, a product of groupthink on a civilizational scale. She was pressured to recant, to apologize, to soften her analysis. She refused. She paid a tremendous personal and professional price for her intellectual integrity. She chose to stand fast, to think for herself, even when it meant standing alone. Her sacrifice revealed a profound truth. The opposite of evil isn't goodness. The opposite of evil is thinking. The simple, difficult, internal act of asking questions. And it was exactly this act of questioning that groupthink is designed to extinguish. What Arendt observed in the moral catastrophe of Nazi Germany, psychologists were beginning to document in the laboratory. The most chilling demonstration of this pressure to conform happened 10 years before the Eichmann trial in a small classroom at Swarthmore College. In 1951, a psychologist named Solomon Asch conducted an experiment that, on the surface, seemed incredibly simple. He told participants they were taking part in a vision test. Imagine you're one of the subjects. You walk into a room and sit at a table with 7 other people. You don't know that the other 7 are actors. The experimenter shows you 2 cards. On the first card, there's a single vertical line. On the second card, there are 3 vertical lines of different lengths labeled A, B, and C. Your job is to say which of the 3 lines on the second card is the same length as the line on the first. It's an easy task. The correct answer is obvious. The experimenter goes around the table, one by one, asking each person for their answer. The first person gives their answer. It's clearly wrong. You chuckle to yourself. The second person gives the same wrong answer. You start to feel a little confused. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 7th participants all give the exact same, obviously wrong answer. Now it's your turn. You can see the right answer with your own eyes. It's right there. But 7 people in a row have confidently said something different. What do? Do you trust the evidence of your own senses, or do you go along with the group? Before he ran the study, Asch asked his colleagues to predict the results. They predicted that less than 1% of people would conform. They were wrong, horribly wrong. Asch found that a staggering 75% of participants conformed to the group's wrong answer at least once. Across all trials, participants conformed 37% of the time. 1/3 of the time, people looked at a line that was obviously shorter and said it was longer, simply because everyone else did. But here's the detail that kept Asch and others awake at night. After the experiment, he interviewed the participants. Some genuinely believed they had seen the lines the way the group did. Their perception had actually been altered by the social pressure. But most of them knew, consciously knew, that the group was wrong. They admitted it in the interview. So why did they conform? They gave answers like, I didn't want to rock the boat, or I didn't want to look like a fool. They had a choice between being right and being alone, or being wrong and being with the group. and they chose the group. This is the microscopic, laboratory-grade version of what Hannah Arendt saw in Nazi Germany. Millions of people looking at an obvious moral wrong and agreeing to call it right, because the social pressure to conform was overwhelming. The Asch experiment reveals the fundamental mechanism of groupthink. We will deny the evidence of our own eyes to maintain our connection to the group. The experiment revealed the what, but it would take decades of research in neuroscience to discover the why. To understand why your brain is so susceptible to groupthink, we need to look at what's happening under the hood. When you're in a situation like the Asch experiment, when your perception of reality conflicts with your group's consensus, two key networks in your brain go to war. On one side, you have your prefrontal cortex, particularly the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is the seat of rational thought, logic, and working memory. It's the part of you that's looking at the lines and saying line C is clearly the correct answer. On the other side, you have your limbic system, the ancient emotional core of your brain responsible for survival. Specifically, two regions are critical here: the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which processes social pain. In a 2005 study at Emory University, Dr. study at Emory University, Dr. Plykrebs study at Emory University, Gregory Burns replicated the Asch experiment using fMRI scanners to watch people's brains in real time. He found something fascinating. When participants chose to dissent from the group, when they gave the correct answer despite the social pressure, their amygdalas lit up. They experienced a genuine, measurable fear response. Their brain was treating social disagreement like a physical threat, like seeing a snake or a spider. Furthermore, their anterior cingulate cortex and insula became active, the same areas that fire up when you stub your toe or burn your hand. Disagreeing with a group literally hurts. Even more disturbingly, when participants chose to conform, when they went along with the group's wrong answer, their brains showed no activity in the regions associated with conscious decision-making. Instead, there was increased activity in the occipital lobe, the part of the brain that processes visual information. This suggests that for some people, the social pressure was so intense it literally changed what they saw. The group's reality became their reality. And in those who conformed, their reward centers showed a little blip of activity. Agreeing felt good. It resolved the painful cognitive dissonance. So think about what this means. Your brain is hardwired to treat social consensus as a shortcut to reality and social dissent, as a threat to your very existence. To think independently, your rational prefrontal cortex has to actively fight and override a primal fear signal coming from your amygdala. This is exhausting, resource-intensive work. It's so much easier, so much more comfortable to just let the group think for you. This ancient wiring was adaptive for millennia, but now it's being systematically exploited by the most powerful economic and technological forces in human history. When Irving Janis and Hannah Arendt were writing, groupthink was an analog phenomenon. It operated at the speed of meetings, memos, and word of mouth. Today, it operates at the speed of light, amplified and weaponized by algorithms with one single goal: engagement. The business model of the modern internet is not to inform you or connect you in any meaningful way. It is to capture and hold your attention for as long as possible, and sell that attention to advertisers. And what have these trillion-dollar companies discovered is the most effective way to hold your attention, triggering your primal tribal emotions. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok have become the most efficient groupthink machines ever invented. Their algorithms don't know what's true, what's good, or what's beautiful. They only know what people like you engage with. They monitor every click, every share, every comment, every second you linger on a post. They learn what triggers your in-group identity and what triggers your outrage toward your out-group. And then they feed you an endless personalized stream of content designed to push those buttons. An internal Facebook report from 2018, leaked to the Wall Street Journal, admitted that our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. The report stated that if left unchecked, the platform would feed users more and more divisive content in an effort to gain user attention and increase time on the platform. A 2018 study from MIT that analyzed 126,000 stories shared on Twitter found that false information reached more people and spread 6 times faster than true information, not because people are stupid, but because false, emotionally charged stories are better at signaling your membership in a particular tribe. Sharing them is a loyalty pledge. Every like button is a tiny vote for conformity. Every share is an act of reinforcing the group's narrative. The algorithm creates a perfect illusion of unanimity. You see 1,000 people in your feed agreeing with a certain point of view, and you think everyone believes this. You don't see the millions who disagree because the algorithm has filtered them out. It has created a digital ash experiment where you are perpetually surrounded by people giving the same answer until you start to believe it yourself. This digital environment creates the perfect conditions for the 8 specific symptoms of groupthink that Irving Janis identified. First, there's the asterisk illusion of invulnerability, the belief that the group is untouchable and can do no wrong. Think of the diamond hands, crypto communities that insisted their coin was going to the moon right up until it crashed to zero. Second, asterisk collective rationalization, where the group explains away any warning signs or contradictory data. This is the entire business model of online conspiracy theory communities. Third, a asterisk belief in the inherent morality of the group hostile. We are the good guys, therefore whatever we do is justified. This is the core belief of nearly every hyper-partisan political group online. Fourth, asterisk stereotyped views of outgroups. Anyone who disagrees is not just wrong, but evil, stupid, or subhuman. Dehumanizing memes and language flourish in this environment. Fifth, asterisk direct pressure on dissenters, asterisk. Anyone in the group who questions the consensus is swarmed, shamed, and accused of betrayal. This is the essence of so-called cancel culture on both the left and the right. Sixth, asterisk self-censorship, which is the direct result of that pressure. People with doubts learn to keep them to themselves. This is the silence you see in corporate meetings and family arguments. Seventh, the asterisk illusion of unanimity, where silence is mistaken for agreement. Because no one is speaking up, the leaders assume everyone is on board. And finally, eighth, the emergence of self-appointed asterisk mind guards. People who actively protect the group from dissenting information, shielding the leader and other members from anything that might challenge the consensus. These are the moderators of echo chamber subreddits, the aggressive reply guys who attack anyone questioning the narrative. These 8 symptoms, supercharged by technology, are now a constant feature of our daily lives. This isn't theoretical. The landscape of modern history is littered with the wreckage of decisions made under the influence of groupthink. Take the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, the classic case study that inspired Janis's research. President John F. Kennedy and his cabinet, a group of men famously dubbed the best and the brightest, approved a CIA plan to invade Cuba and overthrow Fidel Castro. The plan was, in retrospect, a strategic and tactical disaster from the start. But in the cabinet room, a powerful sense of consensus took hold. They had an illusion of invulnerability. After a string of successes, they felt they couldn't fail. They held a stereotyped view of the Cuban military as weak and incompetent. When a few members, like historian Arthur Schlesinger, had doubts, they practiced self-censorship. Schlesinger later wrote in his memoir that he felt a curious atmosphere of assumed consensus and bit his tongue rather than be the nuisance who held up the decision. The result was a humiliating failure that pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union and brought the world to the brink of nuclear war a year later. Or consider the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 1986. The night before the launch, engineers at Morton Teocol, the company that built the solid rocket boosters, were horrified. The temperature at Cape Canaveral was predicted to be near freezing, far below the tested safety limits for the rubber O-rings that sealed the joints of the boosters. They knew the cold could make the rings brittle and cause them to fail. In a tense teleconference, the engineers pleaded with NASA managers to postpone the launch. But NASA was under immense public and political pressure. The launch was a major PR event. The managers engaged in collective rationalization, minimizing the engineers' data. They put direct pressure on the Morton Thiokol executives, with one NASA official famously saying, "My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch? Next April?" The Thiokol executives overruled their own engineers. A mindguard kept the severity of the engineers' concerns from the very top decision-makers. The next morning, 73 seconds after liftoff, the Challenger exploded in a plume of white smoke on live television, killing all 7 astronauts. The group's desire to meet a deadline overrode the clear, life-or-death warnings from its own experts. This pattern repeats with sickening regularity. The decision to invade Iraq in 2003 was fueled by a groupthink bubble within the Bush administration, where doubts about the existence of weapons of mass destruction were treated as a lack of resolve. Intelligence analysts who questioned the narrative were sidelined. There was a belief in the inherent morality of the mission-spreading democracy that justified ignoring the immense risks. The result was a decade-long war that cost hundreds of thousands of lives and destabilized an entire region. It happens in the corporate world, too. At Enron in the early 2000s, a cult-like corporate culture created an illusion of invulnerability. They believed they were the smartest guys in the room, rewriting the rules of energy trading. Their accounting practices were blatantly fraudulent, but inside the company, this was rationalized as innovation. Any employee who questioned the numbers was quickly fired or marginalized. Mindguards in the executive suite ensured that the board of directors only heard good news. They created an illusion of unanimity that held right up until the company imploded, wiping out thousands of jobs and billions in pensions. In every one of these cases, intelligent, experienced people looked at the evidence, felt the pull of the group, and chose to deny reality. What these historical disasters couldn't have predicted is how technology would take this ancient human flaw and put it on steroids. Hannah Arendt couldn't have imagined a world where every citizen carries a personalized propaganda machine in their pocket. Irving Janis couldn't have conceived of algorithms capable of creating perfect frictionless consensus bubbles at planetary scale. Let's get specific. When you open an app like TikTok, the algorithm doesn't care what's true. It cares what you watch. It monitors, down to the millisecond, how long you linger on each video. It learns that videos sparking outrage, anxiety, or tribal validation hold your gaze longer than nuanced, complex content. So within hours, it begins curating a reality for you that is perfectly optimized to trigger these groupthink-friendly emotions. Your feed becomes a highlight reel of your outgroup's most idiotic statements and your in-group's most righteous dunks. This isn't an accident, it's the business model. A calm, thoughtful, intellectually humble population is not a profitable one. We saw this play out in real time during the COVID-19 pandemic. Almost instantly, people sorted themselves into tribes: Team Mask, Team Mask, Team Mask, Team Vaccine, Team Anti-Vax, Team Lockdown, Team Open Up. Within these digital tribes, a fierce groupthink took hold. Each side developed an illusion of moral superiority and a stereotyped, contemptuous view of the other. They collectively rationalized data that supported their position and dismissed data that contradicted it. Scientists and doctors who questioned their group's orthodoxy were subject to immense direct pressure and accusations of heresy. People censored their own doubts for fear of being cast out of their tribe. Each side was absolutely convinced of its own righteousness, armed with a curated feed of studies, anecdotes, and expert opinions that proved their point, completely unaware of the equally compelling feed being shown to the person on the other side. The algorithms had effectively split society into multiple, mutually incomprehensible realities. And now, artificial intelligence is poised to make this exponentially worse. We are entering an era where AI language models can generate infinite amounts of plausible-sounding text to rationalize any position. Deepfake technology will be able to create video evidence of anything a group wants to believe. We are moving from an information economy to a justification economy, where the primary use of AI will be to provide sophisticated-sounding arguments for our pre-existing tribal beliefs. I ain't worried about thought-terminating cliches. We are about to be flooded with thought-terminating essays, podcasts, and video clips, personalized to our exact psychological profile. We have built a world where groupthink is the path of least resistance. It is the default setting of our digital lives. Resisting it is no longer an abstract philosophical virtue. It is an urgent, necessary act of cognitive survival. The scariest part? We are all vulnerable no matter how smart we think we are. In fact, let me prove it to you right now. Have you ever found yourself hate reading an article from the opposing political side? Not to learn, but just to feel that satisfying surge of righteous anger? Have you ever shared a headline that confirmed your beliefs without reading the actual article? Have you ever noticed your own opinions getting more extreme, not because of new evidence, but because everyone in your online community is getting more extreme? Have you ever felt a tiny hit of pleasure when a public figure you dislike suffers a setback, even when you know that feeling is beneath you? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, everyone who disagrees with me on this issue is either stupid or evil, and then fail to consider the statistical impossibility of that being true? Have you ever felt absolutely 100% certain about a complex issue, then later discovered you were completely wrong, and wondered how you could have been so sure? If you answered yes to even one of those, you are feeling the pull of groupthink. If you answered no to all of them, you might be demonstrating an even more dangerous symptom, the illusion of invulnerability. In the last month, you have probably made dozens of micro-decisions based on groupthink. That online argument where you came away more convinced you were right than when you started? That person you dismissed as an idiot in your mind because of their political affiliation? That moment of absolute certainty you felt after reading a viral Twitter thread? Every single one of those is a small surrender of your individual mind to the comfort of the collective. And here's the cruelest paradox of all. The moment you think, I'm too smart, too aware, too independent to fall for groupthink, that is the precise moment you have become most vulnerable. That belief in your own immunity is the primary symptom. Your intelligence doesn't protect you. It just gives you more sophisticated tools to rationalize your conformity. It makes you the most eloquent defender of the group's consensus. This isn't a personal failing. This isn't because you're a bad person. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Prioritize social cohesion over abstract truth. That was a brilliant survival strategy on the African savannah. It is a catastrophic liability in the 21st century. This is why Hannah Arendt's analysis was so profound. She understood that groupthink isn't an aberration. It's the default state of human social life. Resisting it requires constant, conscious, exhausting effort. So if we're all vulnerable, if our intelligence is no defense, and if the entire technological and economic infrastructure of the modern world is designed to push us into this state, what hope is there? Is resistance even possible? The answer is yes. But first, you need to understand what that choice cost Hannah Arendt and what, on a smaller scale, it might cost you. Let's return to Arendt. In the years after she published her report on the Eichmann trial, the attacks were relentless. She was a public intellectual, but she was now profoundly alone. Lifelong friends stopped speaking to her. Fellow Jewish intellectuals published scathing denunciations of her work. She received hate mail. She was accused of being cold, arrogant, and a traitor to her own people. The pressure to recant, to admit she had gone too far, was immense. Her friends begged her to issue a statement clarifying her position, to soften the blow. It would have been so easy to say, I was misunderstood, to make a small compromise to restore group harmony. She refused. She knew what she had seen in that glass booth. A man who was not a monster, but a functionary. A man whose greatest crime was a surrender of the faculty of thought. To portray him as a unique monster would have been a comforting lie. It would have allowed everyone else to say, he is not like us. Arendt's unbearable truth was that Eichmann was like us. He was what we are all capable of becoming when we stop thinking. To compromise on that point would have been to betray the very principle she was trying to defend, the absolute necessity of independent, critical judgment, especially when it is painful and costly. In her later work, Arendt tried to define what this act of thinking really is. She described it as a silent dialogue between me and myself. It's the habit of stopping, of stepping back from the world of action and asking yourself questions. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Do I agree with myself? She argued that it was this internal conversation that Eichmann had completely lost. He had no inner life, no dialogue with himself. He only had the external dialogue with the group, with the bureaucracy, with the Führer. He had become an empty vessel for the will of the collective, and this led Arendt to her most challenging question. Arendt wrote about the need for thinking without a banister. In a stable world, we can rely on traditions, rules, and customs, the banisters, to guide our moral choices. But she had lived through a time when all the banisters of civilization had collapsed. In Nazi Germany, the rules, the laws, the social norms all pointed toward evil. To be a good citizen was to be complicit in murder. In such a world, the only thing you can rely on is your own independent judgment, your own internal dialogue. You have to think for yourself without any external support. That's the question she leaves us with. Can you think without a banister? When the consensus of your group, your company, your country, your political tribe is pushing you in a direction that feels wrong, can you stand alone and trust your own judgment? When all the external signals are telling you to conform, can you retreat into that silent dialogue with yourself and find the clarity to resist? The stakes of this question are not abstract. When you surrender your capacity to think, you lose more than an argument. You lose yourself. You become a puppet for ideas you haven't examined, an echo for opinions you can't defend. You become, in Arendt's view, a potential collaborator in the next great evil, not because you are malicious, but because you are thoughtless. And when millions of people surrender this capacity at the same time, we don't just get bad policy, we get the conditions for totalitarianism. A functioning democracy does not depend on everyone agreeing. It depends on everyone thinking. When that capacity is eroded, democracy becomes a hollow shell, waiting for a demagogue to fill the void with simple, certain, and catastrophic answers. This is what Arendt saw in Germany. She died trying to warn us that it could happen again anywhere. But within this sobering diagnosis lies genuine hope, not naive optimism, but concrete, evidence-based hope. Groupthink feels inevitable, but it isn't. It's a choice. And if it's a choice, it can be refused. Remember the Ash experiment? In a later variation, Ash made one small change. He had one of the actors dissent from the group. When just one other person in the room broke the consensus, the participants' conformity rates plummeted by over 80%. One dissenting voice was enough to shatter the illusion of unanimity and liberate others to trust their own eyes. You can be that one voice. Your courage is contagious. The systems that exploit groupthink are not laws of nature. They were designed by humans, and they can be redesigned. The algorithms that create our echo chambers can be changed. The corporate cultures that suppress dissent can be reformed. If groupthink is a cognitive habit, it can be replaced with better habits. Think of intellectual independence like physical fitness. We no longer live in an environment that forces us to be physically active, so we have to deliberately create practices like going to the gym. Similarly, we no longer live in an information environment that rewards independent thought. The default is to be swept along by the current of the algorithm and the tribe. So we have to deliberately create practices, intellectual workouts, that build the muscle of critical thinking. It doesn't feel natural anymore. It feels like resistance. It is a discipline. And here is the central reframe. You must learn to use your own discomfort as a compass. That feeling of smooth, effortless consensus in a group, that's not a sign of success. That's a warning sign. That's the feeling of groupthink taking hold. The feeling of friction, of awkwardness, of being the one person asking a difficult question, that's not a sign of failure. That is the feeling of actual thinking taking place. The discomfort of independent thought is the price you pay to remain a fully sovereign human being. Every major step forward in human history, the abolition of slavery, the scientific revolution, the civil rights movement, happened because a small number of people were willing to endure the profound discomfort of standing against the groupthink of their time. That is still possible. It has always been possible. So let's get practical. Let's talk about what actually works, not just theory. Concrete practice is your intellectual workout routine that you can start using today to build your resistance to groupthink. As I go through these, don't just nod along. Pick one, the one that feels most achievable or most necessary, and commit to trying it this week. The gap between knowing and doing is where groupthink lives and thrives. First, let's start inside a group setting, like a meeting at work. The practice is called the silent write-down asterisk. Before any discussion begins on an important topic, the leader should say, "We're going to take 5 minutes for everyone to write down their initial thoughts on this issue. No talking." Everyone writes. Then you go around the room and share what you wrote. Why does this work? It short-circuits the two most common entry points for groupthink. Anchoring, where the first person to speak sets the tone for the entire conversation, and the bandwagon effect, where people pile on to the emerging consensus. By getting everyone's independent thoughts on paper first, you ensure a diversity of viewpoints is actually heard before the social pressure to conform kicks in. It's a simple procedural change that can radically improve a group's decision-making. Second practice, assign a devil's advocate. In ancient Rome, during the process of canonizing a saint, the Catholic Church would appoint a advocatus diaboliti, i.e. devil's advocate, whose sole job was to argue against the candidate's sainthood, to find all the flaws and counter evidence. This practice should be mandatory for any important decision. Designate one person in the meeting whose only job is to challenge the emerging consensus, to poke holes in the arguments, to voice all the possible objections. Crucially, you should rotate this role. If it's always the same person, they just get labeled as a contrarian. When the role rotates, it depersonalizes dissent. It's not Dave being difficult. It's Dave doing his job this week. This normalizes criticism and makes it a healthy part of the process, not an act of betrayal. Third practice, and this is for when you're the one with doubts, find your asht alley. Remember how conformity plummeted when just one other person dissented. You don't have to be a solitary hero. Before the big meeting, find one person you trust and say, "Hey, I have some concerns about this project. Am I crazy?" If they agree, you've just formed a coalition. It is 1,000 times easier to say Sarah and I were talking and we have a question than it is to say, "I am the only one in this room who thinks this is a bad idea." Your job isn't to start a revolution, it's just to find one other person, to prove to yourself that you are not alone. That's often enough to break the spell. Fourth, a personal discipline. The steel man practice. Most of us, when we argue, create a straw man. We misrepresent our opponent's view to make it easier to knock down. Steel manning is the opposite. Before you are allowed to critique an idea, you must first articulate the idea back to its proponent so accurately and charitably that they say, "Yes, that's exactly my position." This practice forces you to actually listen and understand, not just wait for your turn to talk. It transforms a debate from a battle into a collaborative search for truth. If you can't steel man the other side's argument, you don't understand it well enough to have a strong opinion on it. Fifth, for big projects, the pre-mortem. This technique, developed by psychologist Gary Klein, is brilliant. Get the entire team in a room and say, "Imagine it is 6 months from now. We went ahead with this plan, and it has been a total catastrophic failure. Everything that could have gone wrong did. Now, take 10 minutes and write down the story of why it failed." Then you go around and read the stories. This technique is effective because it frees people from the social pressure of seeming negative or not being a team player. You're not criticizing the plan, You're fulfilling the imaginative exercise. It surfaces risks and doubts that people were censoring themselves from voicing. Sixth, redesign your information environment with what I call * the friction feed. Your job is to deliberately introduce friction. Go into your Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram right now. Unfollow 3 accounts that only confirm your existing biases. Then, find and follow 3 smart, thoughtful people who you consistently disagree with, not trolls, not idiots, people who argue for the other side in good faith. Your feed should make you uncomfortable. It should challenge you. That discomfort is a feeling of your filter bubble breaking. 7th, and this one is crucial for escaping the tyranny of your group's jargon. * the cliché ban. Every group develops thought-terminating clichés, phrases that sound profound but actually shut down thinking. In business, it might be move fast and break things. In politics, it might be trust the science or do your own research. In your next meeting or discussion, propose a ban on the group's top 3 clichés. If someone uses one, they have to stop and explain what they actually mean in plain language with specific evidence. This forces people to think, not just repeat. 8th practice, * the sanity check circle. You can't trust your own judgment when you're deep inside a group. You need trusted outsiders. Consciously build a small personal board of advisors, 3 to 5 people who you respect, who come from different professions, have different political beliefs, and live in different places. When you feel yourself getting swept up in your tribe's latest outrage or certainty, run it by them. Send a simple text. My corner of the internet is freaking out about X. Does this seem like a big deal to you? Their external perspective is an invaluable antidote to the hothouse atmosphere of your own bubble. 9th, a powerful question to ask in any group. * what would have to be true for this to be a terrible idea? This question reframes the conversation. Instead of defending the idea, you're forced to actively search for its failure points. It's a way of inviting dissent without being confrontational. A similar question is * how confident are we in this decision? On a scale of 1 to 10, what would it take to get us closer to a 10? This reveals hidden uncertainties and allows people to express partial doubt without having to fully reject the plan. And finally, a daily personal practice. * the belief journal. Every night for 2 minutes. Answer 3 questions in a notebook. 1. What was I most certain about today? 2. What is the best argument against that certainty? 3. Did I encounter any information today that contradicted my beliefs, and did I engage with it or dismiss it? This simple practice builds metacognition, the skill of thinking about your own thinking. It trains you to see your own certainty not as a sign of clarity, but as a signal to investigate further. Now, that's a long list. You're not going to do all of them tomorrow. Don't even try. Pick one. The silent write-down, the friction feed, the belief journal. Commit to practicing just one of these for the next 7 days. Build the habit. Then next week, add another. These are not grand, heroic acts. They are small, daily disciplines. But over time, they will rewire your brain. They will build the muscle of independent thought. They will transform you into the kind of person who can think clearly when everyone else is caught in the fog. This is how you learn to think without a banister, not through one big epiphany, but through 1,000 small acts of intellectual diligence. These individual practices are essential, but they are not enough. We are swimming in an ocean of groupthink. And while learning to swim better is crucial, we also need to think about changing the currents. Groupthink is a systems problem, and it requires systems solutions. First, we must demand accountability from the technology platforms that profit from our division. Their algorithms are not neutral. They are explicitly designed to promote engaging content, and outrage is the most engaging emotion of all. We need far more algorithmic transparency. Platforms should be required to explain why you are seeing a piece of content. Is it because it's true? Or is it because it's good at making people like you angry? Some regulations, like the EU's Digital Services Act, are a step in this direction, but we need more. Imagine if social media apps had a feature that showed you the most articulate, thoughtful counter-argument to every viral post. Imagine if they were designed to optimize for mutual understanding, not just engagement. This is not a technological impossibility. It is a failure of will and a conflict of business models. Second, we need to reform education. Media literacy classes that just teach kids to spot fake news are insufficient. They often just make students better at identifying propaganda from the other side, not their own. We need to teach the psychology of bias and groupthink directly. We should be running the Ash experiment in high school classrooms. Students should be taught to steelman arguments, not just debate them. In Finland, the national curriculum includes extensive training on how to recognize and resist propaganda and misinformation. The result? Finnish citizens are consistently ranked as the most resistant to fake news in Europe. This should be a model for the world. Third, we need to change our corporate and organizational cultures. Right now, most workplaces reward conformity and punish dissent. The employee who agrees with the boss is a team player. The employee who raises difficult questions is not a culture fit. This is a recipe for disaster. Organizations need to build structures that protect and encourage dissent. This means implementing practices like the devil's advocate role and anonymous feedback channels. It means promoting leaders who are confident enough to be challenged, not ones who surround themselves with sycophants. The health of an organization is not measured by the harmony in its meetings, but by the quality of its dissent. But ultimately, these structural changes depend on a cultural shift. We have to stop valorizing certainty and start celebrating intellectual humility. We need to make the phrase, "I was wrong," a sign of strength, not weakness. We need public figures, politicians, and journalists who are willing to model what it looks like to change one's mind in response to evidence. We live in a culture that treats changing your mind as flip-flopping, a sign of weakness. It is the opposite. It is the only way knowledge progresses. Every time you publicly admit you were wrong about something, you make it a little bit safer for someone else to do the same. You are actively fighting the cultural tide of groupthink. Let me be honest about what this choice costs. Resisting groupthink means choosing a life of perpetual low-grade discomfort. It means being the one in the meeting who slows things down with a question. It means being the one in the family group chat who refuses to participate in the collective outrage. It means feeling the sting of your amygdala firing when you dissent and doing it anyway. It means sometimes feeling profoundly lonely, wondering if you're the crazy one because everyone else seems so sure. There is no guarantee of success. You can do everything right and still watch your company make a terrible decision or your country elect a disastrous leader. Hannah Arendt did everything right and she was ostracized for it. Intellectual integrity is not a transaction. You don't do it to get a reward. You do it because it is the only way to live as a fully conscious human being. The hardest part is the loneliness. When everyone in your bubble agrees that X is true and you are the only one with doubts, the pressure to surrender is immense. This is the moment where most people break. Because intellectual independence often means social isolation, at least temporarily. But here is the good news. You are not alone. There are other people fighting this fight. They are quiet. They're not the loudest voices on social media. They are the ones asking thoughtful questions, the ones admitting uncertainty, the ones trying to understand before they judge. When you start practicing this kind of intellectual hygiene, you will start finding them. And when you find them, hold on to them. Build your sanity check circle. Become each other's ass ally. This is how resistance sustains itself, not as a solo act of heroism, but as a community of practice. A network of people committed to thinking clearly together. The choice is not between conformity and total isolation. It is between the false comfort of a delusional tribe and the genuine connection of a community of independent thinkers. The next time you find yourself in a group, listen for the warning signs. When the conversation feels too easy, too harmonious. When dissenting opinions are met with jokes or accusations of negativity, when people start using we and they to describe the world, when you hear the phrase, "let's not overthink this," when you feel that warm, comforting glow of absolute certainty settling over the room, that is your signal. That is the moment of choice. In that moment, you have a decision to make. You can't surrender. You can enjoy the dopamine hit of belonging. You can let the group think for you. It's easier. It's warmer. It's the path of least resistance. Or you can choose the harder path. You can choose the discomfort of thinking. You can introduce the friction of a question. You can be the one dissenting voice that liberates everyone else in the room to think for themselves. Hannah Arendt said that in dark times we have a right to expect not a universal light, but the uncertain, flickering, and often weak light of a few. You cannot change the world overnight, but you can choose to be one of those lights. You can choose to think. That choice made consistently day after day, in meetings and in comment sections, in conversations with friends and in the silent dialogue with yourself, that choice is everything. All right, here's what happens next. And I need you to actually do this, not just nod along and forget about it in 5 minutes. Pause this video. I'm serious. Pause it right now. Grab your phone. Open your Notes app. Write today's date at the top. Now write down one belief that your primary group, your workplace, your political tribe, your social circle holds as an unquestionable truth, a sacred cow. The thing you would get in trouble for questioning. Write it as a simple statement. My group believes X. Got it. Good. Now set a timer for 5 minutes. Your job for the next 5 minutes is to find the best, most intelligent, most steel-manned argument against that belief. Not a straw man, not a troll. Find a credible expert, a peer-reviewed study, a thoughtful essay from someone who disagrees. Your goal is not to be convinced. Your goal is simply to understand. After 5 minutes, answer one question. What am I afraid would happen if I voiced this counter-argument in my group? Would I lose status? Would people get angry? Would I be seen as a traitor? Be honest. That fear right there, that's the force of groupthink made visible. That is the social pain your brain is trying to avoid. Now, one of two things will happen. Either your group's belief will hold up under scrutiny, and you will now hold it with earned confidence instead of inherited certainty, or you will find a crack in your certainty. You will feel that uncomfortable sensation of cognitive dissonance. That discomfort is not a sign that you are weak or disloyal. That discomfort is a feeling of growth. It is a feeling of your mind breaking free. Most people will do this exercise once and stop. Don't be most people. Here's your 7-day protocol to build the muscle. Day 1, you just did the 5-minute challenge. Day 2, assign yourself as the devil's advocate for your own thoughts. For every strong opinion you have today, spend 60 seconds arguing the opposite side in your head. Day 3, find one article or post you shared in the last month that you now have doubts about. Go back and delete it, or add a comment clarifying your changed perspective. Day 4. Have one conversation where your only goal is to steelman the other person's position. At the end, ask them, do I understand you correctly? Day 5, do the 5-minute challenge again, with a different belief. Day 6, identify one thought-terminating cliché your group uses. The next time you hear it, ask, what do we actually mean by that? Day 7. Reach out to one person and ask them to be your Ash Alley. This is your training regimen. And because I know you're about to close this video and let inertia take over, here's your accountability. Go to the comments right now. Tell me one thing. The belief I'm testing is, or the practice I'm committing to is, the act of writing it down publicly makes you 65% more likely to do it. And as you read the other comments, you'll realize you are not alone. Finally, write down these 5 questions on a sticky note or your phone's lock screen. These are your emergency circuit breakers for when you feel the pull of groupthink. 1. What is the evidence for this besides the fact that we all agree? 2. What would the smartest person who disagrees with us say right now? 3. What are we afraid to say out loud to each other in this room? 4. What is the cost of being wrong? 5. What would Hannah Arendt ask? When that moment comes in a meeting, in a family gathering, scrolling your feed, and you feel that warm glow of certainty. Stop. Ask these 5 questions. That pause, that choice to think when everyone else is conforming, is how you stand fast. If you are feeling uncomfortable right now, good. That is the feeling of your mind waking up. Most people will go back to the comfortable slumber of consensus. But you are still here. You are not looking for comfort. You are looking for truth. In a world that profits from your intellectual surrender, the simple act of thinking carefully has become a radical act. You will not be perfect at this. You will slip up. The practice isn't perfection. The practice is noticing, correcting, and beginning again. And you need to understand, this is not just about you. Every time you ask a difficult question, you make it safer for others to do the same. Every time you admit you are wrong, you chip away at the culture of toxic certainty. Every time you pause before sharing, you break a link in the chain of viral misinformation. You are not just defending your own mind, you are modeling intellectual courage for everyone around you. At first, they might find you difficult, but in time, they will see you as an island of clarity in a sea of noise. They will start coming to you with their own doubts. That is how this spreads. One person at a time, choosing to be a small, flickering light in the darkness. So I am asking you to share this video, but not with everyone. Don't share it with the person who is addicted to being right. Share it with the person who isn't afraid to be wrong. Share it with your Asha. Share it with someone who you know is also tired of the tribal madness and is looking for a better way. Frame it as an invitation. This made me think. Curious what you think. We are living through the most sophisticated, pervasive, and sustained attack on human cognition in history. The systems we have built are designed to turn us into predictable, reactive, and profitable nodes in a network. They benefit when you stop thinking and start feeling. The only defense we have is the one Hannah Arendt identified 80 years ago, the daily, difficult, courageous choice to think for ourselves. Your mind is the last frontier, the last truly sovereign territory you have. Will you defend it? So here is my final question for you. Answer it in the comments. What is the one belief you are willing to question this week? Be specific. Make it real. The one that makes you most uncomfortable to question, that is where the work begins. Intellectual freedom is not a birthright. It is an achievement. It is something you must choose every single day in 1,000 small decisions. To pause instead of react, to question instead of accept, to understand instead of judge, to seek truth instead of comfort, to stand fast instead of surrender. Let's be the people who stand fast. Let's be the resistance to thoughtlessness that Hannah Arendt died trying to create. Starting today. Starting now. Who's with me?